Hi, good morning. We're going to talk about Rogers Gardens Plant of the Week. We are back to doing that again. My name is Sarah Smith. I'm a horticulturist here at Rogers Gardens, and today we're talking about sweet peas. They have been flying off of the shelf this year. I have seen more interest in sweet peas than I think I've ever seen in sweet peas, which is pretty amazing. I think just a lot of people are a little bit new to gardening and they're discovering new stuff, and this is a really great, easy one to grow. And there's just been so much interest this year. So we are getting a new shipment of sweet peas in tomorrow, which I'm really excited about. If you come in today, we have some sweet peas in, and we have them from two different places. So I'm going to introduce both of those to you. So we are live, so if you want to stick around to the end and ask any questions, of course you can do that. So let's jump right into it. So sweet peas are such a beautiful flower. They are a vining plant, so they need a trellis support to grow on, and they need full sun, but they do really well here in Southern California. They do really good coastal, so this is where it's a little bit different. I'm always telling everybody, like, more inland, the plants are a little bit happier, it's a little bit warmer, but this is the exception. Sweet peas are a cool season kind of flower, and they like to be a little bit on the cooler side, so they grow well in places like Oregon and Washington and back east in full sun there, but because their season is so short, they don't get flowers as long as we do. But because we're coastal and our season's a little bit longer, we get the flowers for a lot longer, and they do really well. So the more coastal you are, the happier they're going to be. The more inland you are, they're still going to be great, but they're going to flower here longer than they would inland. So we have sweet pea starts. You can grow sweet peas from seed. If you're holding on to your seed, you're kind of too late. So if you watched my monthly checklist, I was telling you, get them in that day, because it's really getting kind of late for the sweet pea seeds. So I'm not even going to touch on the sweet pea seeds. If you waited, come in and buy plants to start. But the really cool thing is that we get sweet peas that we get made especially, well, not made, but grown especially for us, from a company that sells the seeds in England. So they're English sweet pea seeds, and we have them grown just for us. So we have a lot of really different, neat, unique varieties that are all handpicked for us by the lovely Steve Hampton. If you've been here at Rogers for any length of time and watched the videos and stuff, you've probably seen Steve Hampton's videos. He does some really beautiful ones. He grows them competitively. He's the one who picks all the colors for us for the English ones. So he picks all the colors, we send them off, have them grown, and we bring them in special just for us. So it's really kind of a neat thing, and really very special. He does really beautiful varieties. His sweet pea fence is fantastic. It's really kind of amazing. Like, he's known in his city for where his sweet peas are, because there's something you can see from the street, which is kind of cool. Sweet peas that we have grown from the seeds from England come in a little pot like this. So, and these ones are all $4.99, and we have a lot of different really cool varieties. But we also got some sweet peas from Annie's Annuals this year. So they started selling back to us again, which is really excited. Annie's Annuals was something we carried for a really long time. During COVID, things slowed down. We weren't carrying their products anymore, but we're carrying them again. And she sent us some really cool varieties, and I have some photos to show you too. We do have photos of the different colors for the English ones on a really big poster that was far too heavy for me to drag over here. But when you come here, you can look at that so you can see what all the pictures look like and the colors are, because these don't have an example, it just says the name on here. But for the Annie's, I did pull some of the pictures, but the Annie's ones come in a little container like this. Hers are a little bit more expensive. They're $9.99. We also have them in a 6-pack. So with these, when you're buying these, you're getting a very specific color. They are not mixed. If you want to buy them in a 6-pack, ooh, and I just dropped one, oops, we're live. Sorry, little plant. We sell them in the 6-packs like this. In the 6-packs, they're $5.99, but it's a mixed color. It's a mixed bag. You do not know what you're going to get. It's going to be a mix of all different kinds of colors. Because I've been doing sweet peas for a while, I'm a little picky, and I want to know exactly what colors I'm growing, and I kind of usually pick a color palette every year to go with. So with this one, you just don't know what you're going to get. But that's a really great deal. And if you're really looking to cover like a pretty big fence or something like that, this is a good deal. We also have them in 1 gallons as well, so they're going to be a little bit taller, but again, you're going to have a mixed bag. You're not going to know what colors you get like this. This one is $19.99. When you're planting them, you got to plant them somewhere where they're going to get really good support. So a chain link fence is perfect, or some kind of trellis. They've got to be tied onto something. They're a little bit fragile. So when you're planting them, you want to space them anywhere from like 8 inches to maybe a foot, depending on how thick and full you want it. I like 8 inches apart from each other. Sometimes I get them even a little bit closer than that, because space is a premium here, and usually I pick more colors than the area that I have to support them, but they're always fine that way. But you want to make sure that you're tying them. This is my favorite kind of tie. It's like a little twine here. I like this much better than the twist ties. The twist ties have almost kind of sharp edges to them, so think like a old school grocery store twist tie. I've accidentally cut some of my tendrils doing it that way. You can see with this they've used the big thick green, but what I don't like about this, and if you look at it, they actually just stapled it. This is kind of hard to tie off, and it's a little bulky looking. I like this because it kind of disappears, but as they're growing in your nice full sun space, because that's what they need, you need to start tying them up. Once you kind of get them tied up after a couple of weeks or so, they'll start working their way up. If you don't tie them right away, they'll grow outward all over the ground, and then it's kind of hard to pull them up because now they're a little, that's when you're going to run into issues where you break them because they're a little top heavy and it's a little awkward. So make sure that you're giving them a lot of attention every like 3 or 4 days in the beginning. Once they really settle in, they grow about 1 inch a week, which is pretty crazy. They grow really, really fast. They like to be in really fertile soil. See, the other thing I want to show you, before I move on to that, labels. You want to label your sweet peas. If you're picking specific colors, label your sweet peas so you remember what they are. So if you go, gosh, that one I grew last year, so pretty, what was it? I don't know, I didn't label it. So it's really important to label it so you remember what it is that you have. And then that way, my little trick is I pull the labels out of the ones that I liked from the year previous. I stash them away in my little seed box that I have, so I remember for next year which ones I want to grow. So make sure you pick up some labels, however you label them. I love these little ones because they're inexpensive. They come in this little cute jar, so it keeps them all nice and organized. So this is my favorite thing. But fertilizing. They're very heavy feeders. Sweet peas will really, really take up a lot of food. The more food you give them, the more healthy and lush they're going to be, and the more flowers you're going to have, which is the whole point of growing sweet peas, right? In the beginning, I use the rose and flour mix. This is down to earth. It's just a granular, kind of like a powder. So when I'm preparing my bed, I put a lot of this down on the soil and mix it in as I'm planting. And then I'm going to do this again, just in smaller amounts. There's directions on the back, but I go a little bit lighter because I do it a little more frequently in the beginning. So I do half the amount, but then I do it every 2 weeks. Once I really start seeing a lot of green growth, then I actually switch over. So this is one that I actually get a little bit more diligent about, a little bit more chemistry-y, a little bit more mad scientist. I do this and then I switch to this one. If you ever watch my videos, usually I'm like one fertilizer, that's it. But with sweet peas, because they're an annual and because the whole point is I want tons of flowers for cutting and giving to neighbors and bringing them in the house, I do get a little bit more particular. I switch over to this one. So this is the Sea Grow, and if you notice, the numbers are really, really big on the end here. So it's 4 here. This is for the green growth. This middle number that you see, this is for producing the flowers, and this is a 26. So I moved from an 8 to a 26. That way I get a lot more flowers, and I'm doing this one every other week. So it's something I mix with water. It's a little more complicated than my throw on the ground and walk away. I mix it with water and I water it in. And that way I get a lot more flowers on my sweet peas, and then I cut them. You want to make sure you're keeping them deadheaded, but really the reason I grow sweet peas is they're pretty outside, but I like bringing them the inside as well. So when you're cutting a sweet pea flower, you want to make sure that there's at least 2 unopened blooms at the end, because they'll have a really, really long life in a vase. I do deadhead them and stuff, but usually I'm cutting them so often I don't have as much deadheading to do, because for me it's all about bringing them inside. It's all about smelling them. It's all about giving them to friends, giving them to neighbors. I know my neighbors get really excited because they're like, oh, Sarah's growing sweet peas again. So I'm always giving them away. So I make sure that I'm cutting them. I let a couple of them go so they're pretty outside, but my whole goal is for bringing them inside. And I want to show you some of the really cool pictures of some of the ones that we're getting from, or we have actually in from Annie's. So just look at some of these really pretty colors. Aren't those amazing? She has some really great colors this year. Hers actually fit in so well together because they have these like beautiful kind of almost well bouqueted out colors that are kind of a little matchy. I love this one. It's called Blue Vein, which the name is a little deceptive because it's not really blue, but has this really kind of cool purpley color. And this one too, Nimbus. What a funny name. I love this one. So there's a lot of really different cool varieties that you can do, and you know, picking a ton of different ones if you have a lot of space, or picking ones that kind of match together. It's really, really fun, and they're really easy to grow. I know there seems like a lot of steps. Really the only steps to it is keeping them tied, keeping them fertilized, and keeping them cut. As long as you're doing that, you're doing really, really good, and you should get a lot of flowers that you can actually be bountiful with and share with everybody. So that is our flower of the week. We're going to get a new shipment in tomorrow from our English sweet pea varieties. We have a lot of the Annie ones in today, and it's something we'll continue to get a couple shipments in, but they are going fast. So if you want to get some really good sweet peas, call us tomorrow. See if they've came in yet, because usually they come in a little bit later in the day, and then come in and buy them up, because man, they go so quickly. It's kind of amazing. So like I said, we are live, so if you guys have any questions about sweet peas or have anything else you want to talk about, put those down below and we'll start answering those questions for you now. So do we have anything?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Sarah. The first question is, can you plant them year-round here in Southern California?
No, they are not a year-round plant. It's something that we will continue to have. It's not the more specialty varieties, but some more of these kind of mixed ones like this. We'll continue to have those, but they slow down once it gets warm. They do not like the warm weather here in Southern California, so they really end once we get to like about mid-spring, summertime. They are zapped, they are done. So it is an annual plant. That's why I do get really diligent about fertilizing with specific flower enforcing fertilizer. I don't use this on my perennial stuff that I have year round. This is stuff I use on my annual plants only. This one I use on my perennial stuff because it's much lower numbers, but I really like to force a lot of blooms out of them because they are an annual plant. So that's what kind of makes them so special too. They're a very seasonal thing, and they just bring me so into that like spring, especially with smell memory being like just such a huge thing. Every time I smell them, it's such a nostalgic thing that just really reminds me of that winter, spring beginning time here that we have here in Southern California. So it's not a year-round plant. So if you want to do them now for sure. And like I said, if you have seed, I mean, you can try, but it's a little bit late for some of the seeds. If you're doing seeds, maybe do a heating pad, do all the extra stuff to get them to grow up a lot faster. But I would say buy starts now because it's a little bit late for the seeds right now. Oh, and the other thing I did not mention, and I bet you there's a question about this. Can you do them in pots? Did someone ask?
Probably.
Yeah,
probably.
I didn't bring it up. Yes, you can do them in pots. You can do these in containers. So if you don't have a lot of ground space to grow something like this, absolutely you can do them in containers, but they have to have something to trellis up. So you have to have some kind of system in there, some kind of pretty teepee or something like that, but they can absolutely be grown in pots, just very fertile soil. The Malibu potting mix would be the very best thing to put them in, but it needs to be very well, rich, fertilized soil. And they don't like to be dried out. They do like to be watered pretty consistently. So when you're working in a container, you just got to be really careful to make sure that you're keeping them well moist. Not soggy by any means, but don't let them dry out. They're very, very lush and they need that water. So absolutely in pots. Okay, any other questions?
Yes. Someone's on the coast of Washington.
Okay.
Should they plant their sweet peas now?
I think you could probably do it now. You're a little bit different because you're so much colder than we are. For us, we're like really already starting to warm up. There's a little bit of a warming trend already happening. For you guys, it's probably still pretty cold. So I would check in with your local nursery there and ask them about that, or even just Google it for Washington and check and see what everybody's doing there. But you're probably can still do. I'm sure you can still do seeds because you're definitely a lot cooler than us. For us, it's just a little bit late to do seeds. So if you have seeds, you can probably still do them. But yeah, check with one of your local nurseries there, and they'll be able to tell you.
Okay. Do you guys deliver the sweet peas?
Well, we do local delivery, so that goes anywhere here in Orange County. We do a local delivery. As for shipping, no shipping on these. We are working on doing some shipping of some plants. We are shipping some of our house plants. So if you go online, you can see that, but we do local delivery. We can do some outsourcing for you as well if you're someplace that's drivable. We can do some outsource work. We have a couple of companies that will go out to farther places than Orange County, but we have to get a quote for that, so it's a little bit different. So, but if you live out of state or if you live someplace that's too far for us to drive to, we do not offer shipping on the plants yet, but on house plants we do.
Okay.
So maybe in the future though, we'll see how that goes. We're hoping that we can.
Would seed grow be great for all flowering plants?
So I use seed grow on all my annual flowering plants. So like the poppies that we're growing right now, all the really beautiful Icelandic Italian bred poppies that are just the really big flowers. I'm looking to see if there's one I can show. I can show you, look at this head. Isn't that bonkers? So if you know anything about Icelandic poppies, that's huge. So this is going to be a really, really big, beautiful flower. But I use it on my annual stuff. I don't use it on any of my perennial stuff. Because I'm not trying to force like a ton of flowers out on my perennial plants. Most of my perennial plants, they do flower, and I'll use this on some of them, like my roses and things, but I use this one on my perennial stuff. This one I use on all my annual stuff. I will also use this occasionally on things like tomatoes, sometimes my strawberries, because that'll give them a really good boost for flowering. But that's the middle number is what is your flowering number, and you can see that's a huge jump from this. This is 484. This is 426. So this is a huge number. So my annual stuff, yes. My perennial stuff, no. Not that this would hurt it, but I'm not trying to force out any kind of blooms on most of my perennial plants.
When should you start sowing them here in Southern California? I've read mixed things.
Yeah. So there are kind of mixed things, and it depends on how inland or how coastal you are. There's also a lot of mixed things on sowing seeds with sweet pea seeds on whether or not you need to soak them or even scratch them with sandpaper. So I was actually asking Steve Hampton about it. When I first learned about doing sweet pea seeds, we would soak them. We'd boil water. We'd pour the boiling water into the sweet pea seeds and soak them for 24 hours. And it's not something you need to really do anymore. Most sweet peas now are being bred so they don't have such a hard shell like that, so it's not something that really needs to happen anymore. He says he doesn't even soak his, which is kind of surprising. He says if anything, he'll rough them up with like a little bit of sandpaper. That's to break that seed coat on there. You really want to start sowing your seeds, especially if you're working with something with doing them inside and you're working with a heating pad and stuff. You can start them a little bit earlier. If you're sowing them directly into the ground outside or into little containers outside, I usually do mine around the beginning of December. I probably could even do it into November. I honestly have stopped doing seeds because we have so many cool varieties now that unless I see a flower where I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to have that color, then I'll do some sweet pea seeds. But for the last 4 years, we've grown all the colors that I really, really like. And even ones I didn't even know about. So when we started getting them in. So I've gotten a little bit lazy, I guess, because I'm here and I get to see all the really different cool ones. But it just depends on your region too. So, I mean, here in Southern California, we're talking, desert to mountains. So there's so many different things here. So it depends on if you get frosts. You're always going to sow after the threat of the last frost. Even in the desert, you do get some nighttime frost. So it just depends kind of on your region. So that's why you are reading different things. And if you're sowing seeds, I like to sow like every 2 weeks because you're going to sometimes hit that window where you hit that magic window and it's all just really starting to grow and you've hit that perfect spot. Every year the weather is different too. We've been really dealing with so many different weather changes. Today we're super hot. I'm standing here and getting a little bit sweaty actually because we're super hot, and yesterday we were really cold. So it's just all over the place, but it's definitely too late for seeds at the moment anywhere local here to Newport. We're just on a warming trend already, so you can try and you might have some luck, but you're going to be a little behind the game with some of them to do them now. But if you have seeds that are going to expire, put them in the ground. Don't wait till next year. Don't let your seeds expire. Just get them all in the ground, and if you get something, awesome. If you didn't, well, you lost like $3 on your seeds basically.
When should you plant the early varieties?
The early varieties are usually the shorter varieties. The early varieties, and the nice thing about the early varieties is because they're shorter and because they flower really quickly, those are the ones we'll continue to carry a little bit longer into the season. These ones we won't. So the early varieties, still you gotta wait until we're not too terribly cold and too terribly wet. Again, the seasons have been super, super different. So those ones you could have started at the very beginning of December. Planting earlier on any of these does not necessarily mean you're going to get earlier flowers. That's a big myth that I see a lot of people, they're like, oh, I'm gonna get them now so I get flowers earlier. It's gonna depend on the weather. It's totally gonna depend on the weather. Just because you planted them earlier doesn't mean you're gonna get earlier flowers. The earlier season ones do flower earlier than these varieties do, but it's still going to totally depend on the weather. So as soon as we start getting them in, which is usually around end of November, we start getting some of these ones. This is an earlier variety here, the Bijou mix. We started getting these in November. So getting them in the ground, getting them nice established, that's really awesome, but you're not going to get those flowers right away just because you got them in the ground earlier necessarily with some of these ones. But yeah, once we start getting them in November, December, yeah.
What advice do you have about seed seed harvesting them for next season?
Yeah, so with those, if you're going, and you want to wait towards the end of the season, so as you're cutting them and bringing them in, if you want to harvest seeds, and you want to watch for the birds, because the birds will eat my seeds. It's funny because sweet peas are supposed to be slightly toxic, but tell it to the birds, I don't know, they eat them. Maybe it's not an issue for them. I also still will see bunnies and squirrels still go after these. So there's supposed to be a slight toxicity in these, but I don't know, with the animals, they seem to not really care, and they seem totally fine, and I keep coming back. I tell it to my squirrel because he loves them. So you can always put little wrappings around it. I have these nice little cloths that I have found. They're the cloths that people use to put little gifts and stuff for weddings and baby showers with a little drawstring. I use those around my tomatoes to keep those squirrels from eating my tomatoes. I'll push them up over that and pull that little drawstring, and that usually helps. You can do the same thing with your little sweet pea seeds. So it's going to look like a sugar pea pod, but it's a little bit fuzzy, and you want to let those get really nice and mature, and you'll get them off of each flower, especially the ones near the bottom. So you just got to watch for the animals and for the birds and stuff from taking those and eating them and carrying them off and burying them elsewhere, and then you have a little stash of sweet peas growing in a really weird area because the squirrels buried it and forgot about it. So you might need to cover them to keep them protected, and wait till towards the end of the season, because once something sets seed, then the plant thinks, okay, my job is done. That's how annuals work. So annuals are plants that once they set seeds, then they're like, okay, I've done what I need to do. I'm not going to continue to produce flowers. That's why annuals are really important plants to deadhead all the time, because if you keep them deadheaded or you keep the flowers cut off of them, they keep trying to produce more and more and more and more. It keeps them more prolific. If you let them go to seed, then they think their job is done. So wait towards the end of the season. Don't try to do that in the beginning of the season, or else you're not going to get any flowers to enjoy. So make sure that you push that off. Any others?
Yes. Can you grow them in the same bed as vegetables?
Yes, yeah, I actually do grow them in the same bed as my vegetables. I have a nice trellis that I grow cucumbers on, and I do mix my eating peas with my sugar snap peas. I only do that because I know the difference between the two. You do not want to accidentally eat one of these. Again, there's a slight toxicity, but if you look at them very closely, you should be able to tell they're fuzzy, they're different looking. I do mix the two together, but I try to keep my sweet peas to one side and my sugar snap peas to the other side, so I'm not having them totally mixed together, and I'm making sure that I'm obviously not eating the wrong ones, but you can really definitely tell the difference between the two, but you can totally do that. In fact, a couple of years ago, I didn't do any edible peas. I did all sweet peas, and it looks really pretty because that's when I have my fall stuff in. So it's my broccolis and my cabbages and kales and stuff, and it looked really pretty growing up behind that. Just make sure they have something to grow up for sure.
How much sun and water do they need?
So they do need a lot of water. They are very water hungry. I water them in the beginning when I first plant them, probably every 2 to 3 days, depending on what the weather is like. When it's a little bit cooler, I don't have to water them as often, and as much sun as you can give them. The more sun, the better. Sun is at a big premium in my yard. It's always shifting and changing because I have a neighbor who has a 2-story house and they built an addition onto it, so it kind of has changed the sun a little bit in my yard. So you want to look for an area that's getting at least 5 hours, and that's at the very least. More than 5 hours would be better. A very full sun area is the best spot to do it. So that's also why it's good to do some in pots, because you can kind of move those around and find different areas in your yard as things are shifting to get the most amount of sun that you have. Just make sure they're trellised and they're totally fine. But 5, and then lots and lots of water. They are very water hungry, and once they really start growing, you can kind of slow down a little bit on the water, but they're very delicate. So you'll notice, I mean, if you skimp on the water for a couple days, all of a sudden you go out there and they're super dramatic and they look really, really bad. If you let them wilt too often, they will not come back very nicely and they'll turn very yellow. So make sure that you're keeping them well watered. Again, not soggy, but you want the soil to feel like a nice wrung out sponge. You don't want to pick up the soil and squeeze it and water's pouring out of it the day after you've watered it, but you want it to always feel nice and moist. The top soil can get a little bit dry, but if you feel these guys, they're very nice and moist. I can even show you kind of what that looks like. You can tell that that's very nice moist soil. It doesn't feel super wet, but my hands come away with a little bit of moisture on there. So good even watering with these guys, and full sun if you can get it.
How deep should the pots be?
They don't need to be terribly deep, but you want at least about, I would say, 2 feet, a little bit more. I always tell everybody the rule of pots for me is the bigger the pot, the easier it is on you. So I try to make it as easy as I can because I'm growing so many different things. I'm juggling so many things in my yard. So the bigger the pot, the easier it is on you. If you have a nice big, like 15, 20 gallon pot, absolutely. We have some growing here. When you come in that we just planted up in some pots, and I would say it's about a 20 gallon volume pot, because we have this nice pretty like teepee tower in there too, so you need enough room to actually be able to trellis them up. But the bigger the pot, the easier it is, because the less you have to water, because shorter, shallower pots dry out faster. And you got to be a little bit careful with pots, because the pot is, especially if you have pots sitting on concrete, now you're dealing with it heating up from the concrete, heating up because of the type of pot that it is. It's probably against a wall or something like that as well, so you get that reflection. So the bigger it is, the less you have to water.
Okay, that seems to be all the questions
Awesome.
for today.
So fun. I love sweet peas. If you haven't grown them before, give them a try. It's a really fun thing. Just make sure you're watering them, full sun, give them some good amount of food, keeping them tied up, and that's all you really got to do. And it's just so great because they are really prolific once they start growing, and it's just so fun to bring them into work, cut them and bring them to friends, give them to your mom. Everybody loves sweet peas, and it's just something that you'll probably get totally addicted to and do year after year after year. There's so many people buying them this year. They are seriously flying off the shelves. I think that the sweet pea movement is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, because people are going to see how fun it is and how neat it is to grow something like that in the yard. So thank you so much for tuning in. It's so fun doing these. I love talking about the plant of the week because it's always something really cool and something that's just so beautiful. So it's really exciting to get to do with you guys. Make sure that you go to our YouTube page and check out all the really awesome videos we have there. Steve Hampton has tons of videos. He has different videos where he actually shows you the flower, because he does grow them really competitively. So you can get a lot of amazing information from somebody who's been doing this for years and is an absolute expert. So go check out Steve Hampton's videos. There's lots of them there on our YouTube page. Make sure that you're subscribed to our email list too, so you know what things are coming up, so you don't miss out on anything. I know if you're here on Instagram or Facebook, you get the notification that we're going live, but sometimes you miss it and you miss something that was really, really cool, and you don't get an opportunity to ask your questions while we are live. But if you came into this later, you can put your questions down below and we'll try to answer those for you as well, and respond to that as well. So thank you so much for tuning in. Be well and be safe, and happy gardening, everybody. Bye.